Why was her locker empty? The door hung open, metal edges catching the first light of dawn, and the hollow space mocked her. 3 magazines, 36 rounds, standard issue for her Mk-22, gone. Even the spare Norma Magnum box, signed for and locked away under regulation, had vanished. The air inside smelled faintly of oil and dust, like a breath stolen from her lungs. She didn't curse. She didn't slam the door. She only stood there, still, as though the missing weight of brass and powder pressed harder than the desert air around her. It was a message, not about ammunition, about her place here, or rather her lack of it. The armory was waking. Boots shuffled somewhere down the corridor, laughter rough and easy. Not hers, not meant for her. This was the test, always the first one, before skill, before performance, before battle. The outsider test, and she'd been marked. Anna Sharma closed the locker with deliberate silence. The slam they wanted didn't come. No proof of anger, no flicker of weakness. She carried the stillness with her, letting it settle in her chest like a stone dropped into water. A low flame, not an explosion. Fuel. She stepped out into the pale wash of sunrise. The valley was waking too, the rumble of generators, the bark of a sergeant calling his squad, the metallic clatter of trays in the chow hall line. Her boots crunched gravel on the path back to her space, a narrow partition in what had once been a supply shed. 3 days she'd been here. 3 days of eyes that slid off her like rain on glass. Names whispered. Conversations that died when she entered. And now, ammunition gone. In the partition's dim light, her cot was squared, her gear laid out in precise geometry. Every strap tightened, every corner tucked. The neatness wasn't for show, it was survival, the one thing no one could take from her. She knelt, sliding a pelican case from beneath the cot. Not standard issue, hers. A relic of countless postings, a kit no quartermaster could supply. The case clicked open, foam revealing a small world of tools. A reloading press, micrometer calipers, a powder scale fine enough to weigh a breath, dies and trimmers, hand tools. To a passerby, it would look like a hobbyist's indulgence. To Anna, it was sovereignty. Ammunition wasn't something she used. It was something she made. From under the cot came a canvas range bag, heavy with scavenged brass. Yesterday's dud pile, abandoned by Marines eager to move on. She had collected every casing, every dented round, every reject. Regulations said they'd be disposed of. She disposed of them differently. She laid the brass across a cloth with the reverence of a surgeon laying out instruments. Her fingers began to work, depriming the brass with a soft, crisp click, sorting by weight, by fracture lines invisible to untrained eyes. She pulled bullets from defective rounds, freeing powder into a clean container with a surgeon's calm. This was no game. Each movement was memory. Russia, where the cold chewed fingers numb and brass cracked like ice. Helmand, where supply lines frayed and she learned the cost of trusting someone else's logistics. Lessons written in loss. Lessons no prank could erase. As her hands moved, her mind replayed the reception in the command tent 3 days before. Colonel Vance had looked her over like a misplaced file, a jaw set in granite, rows of ribbons shining under canvas light, a man who measured the world in ranks and standard operating procedures. Ballistics Integration Advisor, he'd read off the page, eyes narrowing. What the hell does that even mean? She answered, even voice, steady gaze. It means I provide technical expertise on precision marksmanship and equipment, Colonel. He hadn't heard her, not really. His snipers were good, his gunnery sergeant Tanaka better. He didn't need her. That was clear in the dismissal, in the wave of his hand. Observe, don't get underfoot. So she hadn't. She'd watched instead from shaded corners as Marines ran drills and swapped boasts. She saw their patrol routes, their careless habits. She memorized the wind's language in this valley, the way dust shifted, the shimmer above distant berms. She mapped blind spots in the perimeter fence. She studied them as she studied her brass now, measured, weighed, cataloged. They saw an outsider. She saw vulnerabilities they didn't know they had. The brass clicked in her hand, primers popped free, powder poured like fine sand. Her anger had settled into focus. By noon, sweat dampened her temples, the tin roof baking the air. Still she worked, trimming casings, chamfering edges, measuring powder to the grain. Not to regulation loadouts, to her own. She knew this rifle, knew its harmonics, its voice in the dry air. Every cartridge was a statement, balanced, tuned, inevitable. 20 rounds in neat rows, not enough for war, enough to make a point. And that point would not be delivered with words. The day before in the chow hall, whispers had followed her tray down the line. Heard she lost her ammo, one Marine had said just loud enough. Guess she won't be advising anyone tomorrow. A few laughs. And then O'Connell, swaggering with a polished shooting badge pinned to his chest. Gotta be prepared, ma'am. Can't hit targets without rounds. Martinez grinned beside him, boyish and mean. Anna had kept her eyes on her tray. Fork in hand, she ate without pause. No reaction. And that silence, that calm refusal, unnerved them more than any outburst would have. Now, in the heat of her partition, she slid the last bullet into the last casing, seated it with a turn of the die, and placed it beside the others. A full magazine, heavy and certain in her palm. They thought they had taken her voice. Instead, they had given her reason to speak. Tomorrow the range would test them all. Their names would be posted, scores compared, pride sharpened into weapons. And when her name appeared, most would expect failure. That was fine. Tomorrow wasn't about their expectations. It was about performance, about silence breaking with steel and powder, about dignity that didn't argue, dignity that acted. She set the magazine down with care. 20 chances, 20 truths, enough. Outside, the desert wind picked up, whispering against corrugated walls, carrying the weight of dust and distance. Inside, Anna Sharma sat in stillness, the low flame of resolve warming her blood. Not anger, not vengeance, just clarity. And in that clarity she smiled, barely but enough. Because tomorrow, when the rifles barked across the range and the desert echoed back, no one would doubt who she was anymore. Not even her. Why did the range feel like an arena? The air shimmered with heat, the smell of gunpowder already thick before the first command was given. Marines lined their rifles across sandbags, boots grinding into the dirt, their voices rising with cocky bravado. It wasn't just training. It was spectacle. Every trigger pull was a chance to prove something, against the paper silhouettes, against each other, against themselves. Anna stood at the edge, rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes hidden behind calm stillness. To most of them, she wasn't even a competitor. Not today. Not with the whispers about her missing ammunition swirling like desert grit. They saw her as a ghost on the roster, a clerical mistake waiting to be laughed off. But she had come prepared, and not in the way they imagined. Colonel Vance was there, clipboard in hand, moving down the line with gunnery Sergeant Tanaka at his side. Vance's posture was iron, his gaze sharp, but beneath it simmered skepticism. His men were ready. They didn't need an advisor with a title no one could define. He'd made that clear. And yet here she was, standing silently at the perimeter, watching as though waiting for something. The first relay began. The command rang out, "Watch your lanes." Then the staccato rhythm of rifles cracked across the valley. Dust lifted from berms, steel targets sang with the hollow chime of impacts. O'Connell predictably shot well, grouping his rounds with arrogant ease. Between bursts he smirked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Too easy, Gunny. Tanaka didn't answer. His eyes tracked Anna, not O'Connell. There was something about her stillness, the way she observed without shifting, without fidgeting. Professional curiosity flickered there, a recognition that this silence wasn't ignorance. It was patience. The relay ended. Marines slapped shoulders, swapped jibes. O'Connell strutted, Martinez close behind, their laughter aimed like arrows in her direction. Then Anna moved. No announcement, no glance at the colonel for permission. She unslung her Mk-22, walked to an empty firing point at the far end of the line, and set down her mat. The hush was instant, the kind that falls not from respect but from disbelief. She knelt, unhurried, placed her rifle on its bipod and reached to her belt. From a small pouch she drew a single magazine, not issued, not factory-sealed, hers. The metallic click of insertion carried across the range like a bell. 10 hand-loaded rounds, born from scavenged brass and her quiet discipline. The sound silenced even O'Connell's grin. "Where'd you get those?" he barked, a demand more than a question. Anna didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on her rifle, steady hands adjusting the bipod legs. She spoke only when Tanaka stepped closer. "Request permission to engage the long-range targets, gunnery sergeant." The request cut the air. Standard qualification ended at 400 meters. The steel plates at 800, 1,000, and 1,200 were reserved for scout snipers, beyond the reach of most, beyond the point of proving anything. Tanaka hesitated, then nodded. "It's not part of qual, ma'am, but understood." Colonel Vance strode over, bristling, his voice sharp. "What is this, Master Sergeant? I thought you had a supply issue." "It's resolved, sir." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. "Request permission to fire." Something in her tone, calm, unshakable, gave him pause. Around them, Marines leaned in, sensing a shift. Vance's pride flared, but so did something else, curiosity. Finally, he snapped, "Fine. 1 magazine, don't waste my time." Anna lay prone, cheek to stock, body aligning with the rifle like it was part of her spine. She didn't consult a range card. She didn't check her kestrel meter. She had already memorized the valley. The dust devils, the shimmer of mirage, the whisper of wind across her cheek. All of it was catalogued, calculated, filed away. She exhaled. The first shot cracked, deeper, heavier than the others. Silence. Then, after a breathless delay, a clear, ringing ping from the 800-meter plate. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She cycled the bolt, smooth and unhurried, fired again, another ping. She shifted, longer pause, the 1,000-meter target, ping, the murmurs stopped. Silence stretched across the line. O'Connell's grin was gone. His jaw hung loose, eyes locked on the impossible. Shot after shot, Anna worked with machine-like rhythm. The rifle bucked. The valley answered with steel. 10 shots, 10 hits. Each one folding the distance like paper, each one an equation solved with breath and bone. Then the final test. The 1,200-meter speck, almost invisible in the haze. She waited 10 seconds, the world narrowing to crosshairs and heartbeat. The trigger broke. The pause was eternal. Then plink, soft, faint, undeniable, she hit it. A gasp rippled through the Marines, disbelief and awe tangled in the same breath. 3 more times she struck the same plate. 10 rounds, 10 truths, all from ammunition they thought she didn't have. She cleared her weapon, rose with quiet grace, and slung the rifle. The silence that followed was not the silence of mockery anymore. It was the silence of men confronted with something beyond their frame of reference. Anna walked past them without a word, past Martinez, pale and frozen, past O'Connell, whose bravado crumbled into a hollow stare, past Colonel Vance, whose eyes betrayed the first crack in his certainty. As she passed the 2 culprits, she reached into her pouch. 10 empty casings gleamed in her hand, warm from the chamber, etched with her defiance. She dropped them at O'Connell's boots. The brass clinked against gravel, sharp and final. "You can have these back," she said softly. Her voice was calm, even, yet it cut sharper than any shout. "I'm done with them." And she walked on, leaving silence in her wake. The air of Fob Kestrel shifted that day. Whispers carried faster than the desert wind. Not ridicule, not disdain, something heavier. Marines fell quiet when she entered rooms, not to exclude her, but because they didn't know how to address what they had witnessed. She hadn't boasted, she hadn't explained, she hadn't needed to. Respect here wasn't given. It was forged, and she had forged hers with fire and steel in front of every pair of eyes on that range. But respect was only the first test. The valley had its own, And that test was coming faster than anyone realized. Why was the radio so frantic? The crackle of transmissions cut through the operations tent like static laced with fear. Ghost 1-4 Marines on a high ridge had stumbled into something they couldn't handle. The words came sharp, desperate, soaked in gunfire. TOC, this is Ghost 1. Effective fire from Grid 345, we're pinned. We can't maneuver. Colonel Vance leaned over the map table, jaw tight, sweat tracing lines down his temple despite the humming fans overhead. The drone feed above showed it clearly. 4 men pressed into rock no thicker than a wall, tracer fire stitching the air from a cave mouth across the canyon. The enemy had the high ground, dug in with a heavy DSHK. Every burst shattered stone, ricochets flashing inches from Marine helmets. Air support, Vance snapped. 20 minutes out, sir, the S3 answered. His voice cracked on the number. 20 minutes was a lifetime in that canyon. A burst of static. The patrol leader again. 1 man down, repeat, 1 man wounded, holding but won't last long. Vance's hand curled into a fist on the map. He could see it. His Marines shredded on a ridgeline, helpless, waiting for fire from the sky that wouldn't come in time. His men needed something now. Anything. And then he saw her. Anna Sharma, silent at the back of the tent, no invitation, no orders. She had entered without a sound, eyes fixed on the drone feed, face unreadable. Not a twitch, not a word. Only the faint narrowing of her gaze, as though the canyon wasn't pixels on a monitor but a problem written in front of her in numbers and wind. For a beat, Vance felt something foreign, relief. His pride nearly swallowed it, but desperation broke through. His voice, when it came, wasn't clipped with arrogance anymore. It carried weight. "Master Sergeant," he said, cutting through the panic, "can you make that shot?" The room froze. Heads turned. No one breathed. The implication was insane, an enemy nest almost 2 kilometers away. Textbooks said the shot was impossible, but Vance wasn't asking for doctrine. He was asking her. Anna looked from the feed to him. No hesitation. No long pause filled with caveats or disclaimers, just a single nod. "Yes, Colonel." The words landed heavy, like the slam of a magazine home. "Get her what she needs," Vance barked. "Now." The tent exploded into motion. An ATV roared to life outside. Spotting scopes, ammo crates, comms headsets, all thrown together in seconds. Gunnery Sergeant Tanaka appeared at her side, arms full of his personal stash. Match-grade ammunition, lot-tested, consistent. He pressed the boxes into her hands. "These are mine," he said quietly, "trustworthy." Anna studied the rounds, then gave him the faintest nod. But when she climbed onto the ATV, she reached into her pouch and drew one of her own cartridges, the one she had built from scraps, balanced to perfection. She loaded it into a magazine like it was ritual. She trusted no one's work above her own. Tanaka didn't argue. He only grabbed a high-powered spotting scope and climbed into the passenger seat. His voice was firm, final. "I'm your spotter, not a request." The ATV tore across gravel, throwing dust behind them. Marines stopped mid-step to watch, some saluting instinctively, others staring in confusion. The machine bounded toward the western promontory, the only high point with line of sight into the northern canyon. Inside the TOC, the tension twisted tighter. All eyes were on the drone feed, on the ridgeline where Ghost 1 clung to survival. The captain at the intel terminal worked furiously, fingers flying, clearance codes unlocking redacted files. He muttered under his breath, eyes widening. "Sir? Oh my God." Vance was beside him in an instant. "What is it?" The screen shifted. Layers of black bars peeled back, revealing fragments of truth, past units, call signs. One word flashed, stark against the classified wall. "Carries." Vance frowned. The name meant nothing to him. But across the net, Tanaka froze mid-scan, his voice taut. "TOC, repeat that call sign." "KER, yes," the captain answered, voice almost reverent. The room stilled. Even the radios seemed to hold their breath. The young intel officer swallowed. "Sir, it's a myth, a ghost story from the Hindu Kush. A sniper who made impossible shots changed entire engagements, 200 plus confirmed. One was a commander taken from a moving helicopter. No one knew if it was real. No one knew if it was man or woman, just Keres, the fates, death incarnate." Silence swallowed the tent. On the overlook, Anna lay prone, her body and rifle forming a single line. Tanaka's scope locked on the cave. His voice came steady, practiced. "Target acquired. DSHK-4 personnel. Wind gusting variable." Anna didn't respond. Her eyes closed for a beat. She pictured the arc, the drift, the Earth's pull. The round's long flight across air so thin it deceived, wind so cruel it lied. When she opened her eyes, the world had narrowed to crosshairs and breath. In the TOC, Vance whispered to himself, almost unbelieving, "She's real." Tanaka gave the wind call. She exhaled. The rifle thundered. A second stretched. Two. The vapor trail whispered across canyon air. In the cave mouth, a puff of dust, inches from the DSHK's barrel. "Miss." Groans echoed in the tent. Vance slammed a fist on the table. "Damn it." But Tanaka's voice cut sharp. "Ranging shot, stand by." Anna's hand moved with microscopic adjustments. 2 clicks elevation, half a click windage. She chambered another of her hand-loaded rounds. No rush, no panic, just fluid precision. She fired again. The seconds bled slow, each heartbeat a hammer. In the cave, a bright flash, then a violent bloom of smoke and debris bursting outward. The DSHK went silent. "Target destroyed," Tanaka shouted, his calm cracking into triumph. "Splash, good hit, good hit." The TOC erupted. Cheers, shouts, relief like floodwater breaking through a dam. Marines clapped backs, fists hit tables. On the drone feed, Ghost One scrambled from cover, dragging their wounded comrade to safety. Colonel Vance sagged against the map, his chest heaving. He stared at the glowing word on the screen, Keres, and then at the silent woman on the ridge who had just saved his men. Anna cleared her weapon with quiet efficiency, slid the rifle into its case and stood. No smile, no triumph, just the quiet dignity of work completed. She and Tanaka climbed back on the ATV, the sun dropping low, painting the canyon in gold. No celebration passed between them, only respect. By the time they rolled back into camp, the base had changed. Marines stopped what they were doing, stood straighter. Eyes followed her with a weight that wasn't dismissal anymore. It was reverence. She passed a young lance corporal who snapped into a crisp nod, unprompted. She returned it with equal sharpness. Near the armory, Martinez looked away, shame burning on his face. O'Connell forced himself to stand at attention, eyes locked forward, jaw tight. She paused, looked at him, and with a nearly invisible nod she passed on. Not forgiveness, closure. At the command tent, Colonel Vance waited. No clipboard, no aide, just him, rigid but changed. "Master Sergeant Sharma," he said, voice stripped bare. "That was the finest piece of marksmanship I have ever witnessed." He raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute, not as officer to subordinate, but warrior to warrior. Anna returned it, hand steady in the fading light. The salute held, unspoken truth passing between them. Respect wasn't given, it was earned, and today it was sealed. Night fell over Kestrel. The story spread faster than radio waves. A ghost was real, and she was theirs. Why was the base so quiet after the storm? The firefight in the canyon was over. Ghost One had limped back through the wire, battered but alive, their wounded stable in the medical bay. The heavy machine gun nest was smoke and rubble, courtesy of a single shot fired from almost 2 kilometers away. And yet, instead of celebration, Fob Kestrel settled into a hush. It wasn't silence born of fear or exhaustion. It was reverence. Everywhere Anna walked, heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Marines who had smirked days before now stood a little straighter, eyes uncertain, hands twitching as though unsure whether to salute. Respect here was earned through heat, through grit, through blood. She had done what none of them believed possible, and they didn't quite know how to hold it. She carried it quietly. No boast, no lecture, just her rifle cleaned and disassembled on her cot. The brass casing from her second shot lay beside it, polished and perfect, a single memento. She worked in silence, hands steady as always, every movement deliberate. The knock at her door came soft. She paused, cloth in hand. "Come in," she said. Gunnery Sergeant Tanaka stepped inside, a mug of steaming coffee in his grip. "The good stuff," he muttered, setting it carefully on her table. "Not Chow Hall sludge. Thought you might want it." His eyes scanned the rifle parts, the single casing, her quiet posture. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He had seen everything that mattered through his spotting scope. "The men from Ghost 1, he said finally, voice low. "They wanted me to thank you." Anna didn't look up. "I was doing my job, Gunny." Tanaka's mouth twitched, not a smile exactly, but close. "That wasn't a job, Master Sergeant. That was a miracle." He hesitated, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "The stories didn't do you justice." He didn't say the name, Cares. He didn't need to. It sat between them like a shadow, unspoken but real. He gave a single nod, deep and certain, before stepping out again, closing the door softly behind him. For a long moment Anna stared at the door. Then she turned back to the rifle, wiping down the bolt. The coffee steamed quietly in the corner. Her hands never stopped. This was her sanctuary, not their approval, not their awe, this. The craft, the discipline, the silence. Elsewhere the shift was sharper, messier. O'Connell couldn't meet anyone's eyes. His easy grin was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. The casing she had dropped at his boots rattled in his mind louder than the crack of her rifle. He replayed the moment endlessly, the sound of steel singing at 1,200 meters, the feel of shame crawling under his skin. Martinez walked beside him, pale, avoiding words. Their squadmates gave them distance now, as though cowardice or stupidity were contagious. When their platoon sergeant finally called them in, his voice was quiet, almost dangerous. "You two idiots," he growled. "Do you have any idea what you tampered with? You didn't just pull a prank. You screwed with the gear of an asset this unit is damn lucky to have. The colonel should have crucified you already. The only reason he hasn't is because he's still trying to figure out how badly he misjudged her himself." Neither O'Connell nor Martinez spoke. Their silence was admission enough. Meanwhile, inside the command tent, Vance sat at his desk long after the reports were filed. The name burned in his head, Cares. He had dismissed her as a distraction. He had treated her like excess baggage. And then, in one impossible shot, she had dismantled everything he thought he knew. His pride churned with shame, but something else settled in its place. Respect edged with fear. Underestimation was a sin, and he had committed it fully. From that day, Anna Sharma was no longer an anomaly at Kestrel. She was a presence, a myth wrapped in flesh. The Marines gave her space, not out of disdain, but out of caution, reverence. The way men tread carefully around a storm they know could rise again at any moment. And yet, for all the whispers, for all the wary glances and newfound respect, she remained unchanged. She wasn't there for admiration. She wasn't there for legend. She was there for the work. Nights fell the same. Her rifle lay across her table, brass-lined in neat rows. She worked by the steady glow of a single light, every part cleaned, every edge smoothed, every variable accounted for. Outside, Marines told her story in hushed tones, building a legend they half believed, half feared. Inside, Anna remained a woman alone with her craft, measuring her worth not in their words, but in the precision of her hands. She had passed their test, but she knew this wasn't the last. The valley always had another. Why couldn't she sleep? The desert was quiet, but not inside her mind. Beyond the wire, the valley stretched dark and endless, a jagged horizon beneath a cold scatter of stars. She lay on her cot, eyes open, body still, but memory wouldn't release her. Every impossible shot carried its echo. Not the sound of steel ringing, not the relief in the TOC, but older echoes, places she never spoke of, names she never let herself remember too long. They had called her Keres, whispered it like a ghost story in places where men died fast and often, and she had lived up to it over and over. Each impossible shot was another thread in a legend she hadn't asked for. A myth had weight, and weight carried consequences. Her hand moved without thinking, finding the casing she had kept from the canyon shot. She turned it slowly in her fingers, feeling the faint grooves where her rifle's chamber had bitten brass. A perfect artifact of violence, but also of survival. She wasn't proud. Not exactly. Pride was dangerous. Pride cost lives. What she felt instead was clarity, the kind that came when everything else stripped away. But clarity was not the same as peace. She set the casing back down and sat up, boots sliding onto the floor, uniform trousers creasing sharp against her legs. She couldn't stay in the cot. Sleep would not come. She stepped outside. The bass was muted, the low hum of generators mixing with the occasional bark of a watch sergeant. The air was cool, carrying the smell of dust and oil. Marines on night watch stiffened as she passed, eyes following her with that same new tension, respect shaded with unease. She ignored it, moving toward the range. The valley opened wide there, even under moonlight. She lay prone, rifle resting across her pack, and stared through the scope at shadowed hills. She wasn't firing. Not tonight. Just breathing, measuring distance, reading wind that carried sense only a marksman noticed. She whispered adjustments under her breath, as though the land itself was speaking to her. And then footsteps, not hostile, familiar. Tanaka settled beside her, folding his legs with the quiet weight of someone who'd lived his life in the field. He didn't bring a weapon, only a thermos he set down between them. "You don't sleep much," he said, not a question. She stayed behind the scope. "Neither do you." He grunted, poured coffee into the lid. The smell cut through the dry air. He handed it to her without looking. She took it, fingers brushing steel, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "You've done this before," he said finally. His tone wasn't accusatory, it was certain. "Not just once, not just here." Her breath tightened. She lowered the scope, finally meeting his eyes. He didn't flinch. He had already seen enough to know. "There are stories," he continued, "about a shooter in the Hindu Kush. Long before most of these kids put on uniforms, they called her Keres, the Fates, death itself. I thought it was a campfire myth." He paused, his gaze steady. "But I watched you, I spotted for you, and I know it's not myth." She didn't answer. Words would have cheapened the silence between them. Instead, she set the coffee aside and returned to the scope. "You're not going to confirm it," Tanaka said quietly. "You don't need to. But listen," he leaned closer, voice low, measured. "These men, they need to believe. In something. In someone. You showed them what's possible. That kind of belief changes how they fight, how they survive. Don't dismiss that. Don't dismiss what you are to them." Anna stayed still, but something flickered in her chest. Not pride. Not agreement. Something closer to unease. She had been a ghost for so long. To be seen now, even in whispers, felt dangerous. Tanaka didn't push. He poured himself a cup, sipped slow, and let the silence settle again. Two soldiers under moonlight, neither sleeping, both carrying weight they couldn't unload. By dawn, the patrol reports came in. Movement north. Insurgent supply lines shifting, growing bolder. A convoy of trucks had been spotted threading through the mountain passes. Too large, too organized for a ragtag ambush. Someone was arming them, feeding them. The orders dropped fast. A strike force would intercept, a joint effort of rifle squads and scouts. Risky but necessary. Colonel Vance called the briefing. His voice carried the same authority, but something had changed. His eyes didn't skim over her anymore. He spoke to her directly, as though her place at the table wasn't a question. "Master Sergeant Sharma," he said, tapping the map. "You'll be embedded with the Overwatch team. Long sightline here, ridge overpass. His finger landed on a jagged contour. If they bring heavier weapons, we'll need you. For the first time since arriving, he wasn't dismissing her. He was depending on her. She gave a single nod, nothing more. As the Marines filed out, their chatter buzzing, she stayed still. Her eyes traced the ridgelines, the choke points, the distance markers burned into the paper. The work ahead was clear. But in the corner of her mind, the old unease lingered. Legends lived in shadows. They didn't stand in briefing rooms. They didn't sit shoulder to shoulder with squads who laughed too loud to hide their nerves. She had spent her life as a ghost. Now she was being pulled back into flesh and bone, into expectation. And expectation had weight. She returned to her quarters, her kit laid out like ritual, each round hand-checked, each strap tightened, every movement deliberate. Her heart was calm, but her mind whispered the truth she couldn't ignore. Legends were useful until they weren't, until the myth demanded more than the human underneath could give. She chambered one round, testing the smoothness, then ejected it, sliding the brass back into her palm. She studied it under the stark light, a key for a lock not yet seen. Tomorrow, that lock would be waiting. And she would have to decide how much of herself she was willing to spend opening it. Why did the convoy sound like a storm rolling through the valley? Engines growled low before dawn, a mechanical rumble swallowed by the mountains until it was suddenly upon them. Trucks, battered and camouflaged with dust, crawled along the switchback trail. In their beds, tarps, crates, shadows that might have been men or munitions. Too many for coincidence. Too organized for chance. From the ridge above, Anna lay prone, cheek against stock, scope cutting through haze. The overwatch position gave her everything: angles, distance, wind sweeping down the canyon like invisible rivers. Around her, the scout team crouched low, rifles bristling against the rocks. They waited for the signal. Below, the strike force moved into position, squads spread thin across choke points. Tanaka's voice crackled in her earpiece. Calm, steady, targets confirmed, looks like technicals up front, possible heavy gun mounts under tarps. You see them. Anna adjusted the focus. A corner of canvas shifted, revealing the glint of steel. She murmured, "Yes." "Then this is real," Tanaka answered, no doubt in his tone. Colonel Vance's voice cut through the net. "All elements stand by. Overwatch, you're the key. Call it." The weight of silence pressed down on her. She could feel the younger Marines stealing glances, waiting to see if she would speak, if she would lead. Legends weren't supposed to breathe. But here she was, heart steady, lungs measured, voice about to carry over the net. "Stand by," she said, calm, controlled. Then she shifted, aligning her reticle on the first truck. The convoy slowed at the choke point, unaware of the teeth waiting in shadows. Dust curled around their tires. Anna exhaled, "Execute." The ridge erupted. Her rifle cracked first, the shot punching clean through the exposed engine block of the lead technical. It screeched, stalled, jackknifed across the narrow trail. The convoy locked behind it, momentum strangled. In that heartbeat, the valley became chaos. Squads opened fire from cover. Muzzle flashes sparked against rocks, tracer rounds stitching through canvas and steel. Shouts, screams, engines straining. Anna worked the bolt, chambering her second round. Through smoke and dust, she saw the tarp rip open on the third truck, revealing the heavy muzzle of a mounted gun swinging upward. Her trigger broke before the barrel leveled. The gunner dropped backward, crimson blooming against canvas. She didn't pause to watch him fall. The rifle bucked again, then again. Each shot was a blade slicing through confusion, carving order where chaos threatened to devour. Her rounds weren't just hitting targets, they were shaping the fight. But then the unexpected. Movement on the ridge opposite, shadows slipping from rocks, insurgents with RPGs slung over shoulders. They weren't part of the convoy. They had been waiting, hidden, a hammer to smash the ambush from above. "Contact high ridge," a Marine shouted over comms. Panic edged his tone. The squads below were pinned by fire, too exposed to pivot. Anna's scope swung, breath tightening. Distance, 400 meters, angled wind, thin air. She steadied, but her magazine was running low. Her hand dipped to her pouch, drawing the cartridges she'd built herself, each one a promise. Tanaka's voice came quiet, deliberate. "Your call, Master Sergeant." She chambered the first. Crosshairs settled on the lead insurgent, raising an RPG. Trigger broke. He crumpled, weapon tumbling into dust. Another emerged, sprinting to cover. She tracked, fired. The shot folded him mid-stride. The ridge lit with muzzle flashes as insurgents realized they were being hunted. They dove for rocks, but Anna's scope followed with mechanical patience. Shot, breath, shot. Each round a hammer, driving panic into their line. Below, Marines surged forward, momentum reclaimed. Convoy trucks burned, secondary explosions rumbling as crates of munitions cooked off. The canyon became a furnace of dust and fire. And still, through it all, Anna's focus never wavered. Her world was narrowed to crosshairs and breath, distance and drift. The battle was noise. She was silence inside it. When her final round ejected, the ridge opposite was empty of fire. Smoke curled upward, bodies strewn among shattered rock. The threat was gone. Her rifle was hot, barrel shimmering with heat mirage. She rolled her shoulders, exhaled, and only then let the noise of the battle return. Shouts of "clear" echoed from below. Marines moved through wreckage, securing survivors, pulling crates from burning trucks. In her earpiece, Vance's voice returned, stripped of arrogance, heavy with something else. "Outstanding work, Overwatch, outstanding." But Anna didn't answer. She only pulled her rifle close, resting her chin lightly against the stock. Because she knew the truth. This wasn't over. Legends didn't rest after victories. Legends demanded more. And she could already feel the weight of that expectation tightening around her, as certain as the scope's reticle finding its next target. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? The convoy was ash now, twisted steel glowing faint red in the night. The smell of burnt fuel carried for miles, acrid and thick. Marines picked through the wreckage, pulling what was salvageable, marking bodies for collection. But when they looked up at the ridge, where Anna still lay prone with her rifle across her chest, they didn't see a Marine. They saw something else. Whispers traveled fast. She shut down the whole flank. Those RPGs didn't even get a shot off. Never seen shooting like that. Every retelling stretched the truth, but the core remained. She had turned a bloodbath into survival. She had saved them again. And with each whisper, she felt the weight. Back on base, the atmosphere shifted another degree. Marines who once scoffed now stepped aside when she passed. They didn't just respect her, they carried a wary awe, like standing near a storm cloud they didn't want to provoke. Conversations dropped silent in the chow hall. Eyes lingered. O'Connell, once loudest among them, now walked in silence, his back straight, his jaw set. He hadn't spoken to her since the range, but his avoidance was no longer born of contempt. It was shame mixed with a raw, unsettled respect. One night as she left the mess tent, he was waiting by the path, not blocking it, just standing there, posture rigid. "Ma'am," he said, voice low-clipped, "I was wrong." She paused, studying him. The desert wind tugged at her sleeves. His eyes didn't meet hers, fixed instead on some point just beyond her shoulder. His voice trembled once, then steadied. "I underestimated you. We all did." Anna let the silence stretch. She didn't owe him comfort, she didn't owe him absolution. And yet she gave the slightest nod before stepping past. Not forgiveness, not friendship, closure. He stood there, long after she disappeared into shadow. Inside her quarters, the casing from the convoy lay beside the one from the canyon. She cleaned it slowly, methodically, placing it in line with the other. Each piece of brass was more than metal. It was proof. But proof of what? Competence, survival, or the legend creeping back around her shoulders like an old, unwelcome cloak. Tanaka visited again late with coffee in hand. He didn't knock this time, only entered and set the mug down. His words were few. "You carried them today." Anna didn't look up. They carried themselves. He studied her, then the casings lined neatly in front of her. "You keep these like reminders." "They are reminders," she said, her voice flat. "Not trophies." He nodded once. "Then let me say what they won't. Every Marine here owes you his life, including me." The words landed heavy, but she gave no reaction. Praise was dangerous. Its softened edges blurred discipline. She couldn't afford that, not now, not ever. Later, when Tanaka left, the quiet returned. She sat alone, disassembled rifle across her lap, and let memory surface, shards of the past clawing at her calm. Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush, snow biting her skin through thin gloves, radio static filled with desperation. Her voice silent then, too, as she squeezed the trigger, one life ending to save dozens. That was the first time someone had whispered the name, Keres, the fate no one escaped. She had carried it ever since, not as pride, as burden. The Marines at Kestrel thought they had discovered her now, but she had been here before, countless times in countless places. Each shot saved lives. Each shot stole something from her too, piece by piece. That night she wrote nothing down. She logged no report. She simply lined the casings in order, cleaned her rifle, and sat in stillness. Outside, laughter carried from the barracks, men drinking in relief after surviving another mission. She listened, faint smile touching her lips, not because she shared in their joy, but because she knew they would sleep tonight. And that was worth something. But deep inside, the truth gnawed. Legends grew fast, and when legends grew too large, they stopped belonging to the person who bore them. Sooner or later, they consumed her. The valley wasn't done. She knew it. She could feel it in the wind, in the silence, in the way Colonel Vance had begun to look at her now, not as distraction, not as anomaly, but as weapon. And weapons were used until they broke. Why did the valley feel like it was holding its breath? Days passed. Patrols rotated. Intel briefings came and went, each more tense than the last. There was talk of a larger push by insurgents, whispers of heavy weapons moving through mountain passes, rumors of an assault aimed squarely at Kestrel itself. The base carried the weight of anticipation. Marines sharpened routines, polished rifles, joked too loudly in the chow hall to hide nerves, and always their eyes drifted toward Anna. Not openly, not in words, but in the hush when she entered, in the way conversations stumbled and shoulders straightened. They were waiting, not just for the fight, but for her to define it. And she felt it, like a storm front pressing on her chest. When it came sudden. Pre-dawn quiet ripped open by the crack of mortars, the shriek of incoming rounds. The ground shook, sandbags burst, alarms wailed across the compound. Marines scrambled from bunks, boots half-laced, weapons clutched. The valley was alive with fire. Anna was already moving. Rifle in hand, she slipped through chaos with the calm of someone who had walked through worse. Explosions painted the dawn in jagged bursts. Reports flooded the net. Contact on the northern perimeter, squads pinned, casualties mounting. She climbed the watchtower without a word, Tanaka at her side, spotting scope slung, his face hard with focus. From the tower's edge she saw it. Insurgents flooding the ridgeline, dozens of them, silhouetted against the rising sun. RPGs arched through the air, heavy machine guns hammered downrange. "Overwatch, we need you." Vance's voice cracked through the comms, not as command but as plea. Anna dropped prone, bipod braced on the tower ledge. Her breath slowed, her world narrowed. She sighted the first machine gun tucked against rock, muzzle flashing, trigger broke. The gun went silent. Another. Each shot a blade of order slicing through chaos. Marines below surged forward, courage swelling in the wake of her precision. But the enemy pressed harder. More shadows cresting the ridge, more fire lashing down. For every target she dropped, two more appeared. The fight blurred, stretched. Her magazine emptied, brass spilling like rain at her elbow. She reloaded with practiced calm, never rushing, never breaking rhythm. Tanaka called wind shifts, range adjustments. His voice was steady, but she felt the strain behind it. They were both burning themselves to keep the line intact. At one point she glanced sideways, saw Marines in the trenches below, wide-eyed, watching her. They were fighting, yes, but they were also drawing strength from her silence, from her calm in the storm. It struck her then, this was what Tanaka meant. Belief mattered. Belief gave them endurance, courage, fire. She wasn't just pulling a trigger, she was anchoring them. Hours bled into each other. The attack faltered, wavered, broke. Survivors scattered back into the mountains, their momentum shattered. The ridge fell quiet, the valley echoing with the crackle of flames and the groan of twisted steel. Castrol still stood. When the dust settled, when the medics carried the wounded and the dead, when the last echoes of fire faded into silence, Anna stayed in the tower, rifle cooling beside her, scope still aimed at the empty ridge. She waited until the valley was truly still before she rose. Back on the ground, Marines stood in clusters, dirt-streaked, bloodied, alive. When she passed, they didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They simply straightened, eyes meeting hers with something deeper than words: respect, gratitude, awe. Colonel Vance waited near the command tent. His uniform was torn, soot streaking his face. He didn't speak at first, just met her eyes. Then slowly, he raised his hand in salute. Again, not as officer to subordinate, but as one warrior to another. She returned it, precise, steady. And then she walked on, leaving him in the fading light. That night in her quarters, she cleaned her rifle as always, wiping dust from the bolt, smoothing carbon from the barrel, lining the day's casings in a neat row beside the others. Each one a memory, each one a weight. The base outside pulsed with quiet celebration. Relief, survival, victory. She didn't join them, she didn't need to. Her dignity wasn't in the noise. It was here, in the silence, in the ritual, in the unbroken line of purpose stretching from her past into this very moment. They had tried to take her voice by stealing her ammunition. Instead, she had built it anew, round by round, until the valley itself echoed with it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.